So far, the business community, and I mean, there was a report by Goldman Sachs and their local partner, Dragon Capital, or at least formerly local partner, in which they basically expressed sort of relief that Tymoshenko was not going to be in the runoff because her comments have been very antagonistic towards the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Obviously, she was playing to a populist audience, which has a political value, but at the same time, the markets don't like that. Investors don't like that. Banks don't like that. So while it was politically expedient, it failed to get her in the runoff. But two, the markets did breathe a sigh of relief. Now, Poroshenko is pretty much a known quantity, so they know what's going to happen more or less with him. So they can do an IMF program. The standby program, for example, could continue. It's up for review anyway at the end of the year, based on what happens with the elections and the new government, which was a wise move by the IMF, I believe, kind of a wait and see approach. At the same time, they know with Poroshenko, if it's a second term, then probably if it's like the first term, there'll be a lot of negotiations, some give and take, but more or less they'll be able to push forward and get what they want. Now with Zelensky, he's obviously a wild card. He has, on the plus side, he's got two respected economic advisors. One, former finance minister Alexander Daniluk, who appears to be playing a larger and larger role in the Zelensky campaign. Daniluk was well liked by the IMF and the World Bank. He's one of the early advisors to sign on with Zelensky, and so his presence has actually calmed the markets quite a bit by the prospect of a Zelensky victory. There's also Aivaras Abramviskas, the Lithuanian-born former Minister of Economy and Trade. Aivaras is also well liked within the international community, well respected, seen as a corruption-free individual. Now, obviously, the big elephant in the room is what's Zelensky's relationship with Kolomoisky. Obviously, they have a close relationship on a business level, and how would that affect anything that happens with the markets? Would that, for example, would the state administration of Privat Bank, would that suddenly be changed, and would it go back in the local courts to ownership by Kolomoisky? I mean, that's a legitimate question. So far, the markets have discounted that, and so they are taking a wait and see approach. But for the most part, there's been no big changes in the market. Western investors have been protected for the most part. That's important. But at the same time, and again, each person, once they get in office, they're always a little bit different than before, with very few exceptions in politics. So, but yeah, absolutely, the approach has been wait and see. It's not one of shock and awe or fear, but a healthy, let's wait and see what happens. Now, that could change in a heartbeat. You do one renationalization of a state enterprise, and boom, it's done. I mean, that's the end of foreign investment. Well, I think the three things that I think anyone wants to see is, one, they want to see the IMF program preserved, continued. That when the IMF program's in place, it means that the country's going to function, it's going to operate, it's not going to get bankrupted, services are going to be provided, salaries are going to be paid, so forth. And Ukraine owes a lot of money to the IMF, and eventually that's got to be paid back. But the IMF's been flexible on those terms. So that's number one, regardless of who wins, is a continuation of the IMF program. The second thing is protecting investors, both domestic and foreign investors. You screw over one foreign investor and the word spreads on the street very quickly. The market picks it up in a heartbeat. Now, again, for the most part, foreign investors, it's not easy. It's not like investing in North America and Canada, the U.S. But if you play by the rules, you don't take shortcuts, then you can make money here. But it's you gotta be on your toes. So sending a sign that foreign investors are not going to be touched, they're not going to be singled out or targeted. That's another important sign, regardless of who wins. Ukraine, to truly grow, they've got to get foreign investment in. I mean, you look at the size of investment in Poland, in Hungary, Slovakia, Romania even, and you compare that to what Ukraine has, and it's just a drop in the bucket. So we've got to get more and more foreign investment in, because that will also loosen the hold of corruption on the country. You get, factor certified Western capital, that makes a huge difference in creating jobs, paying taxes, growing the economy. So that's another huge sign that the market's looking for, regardless of who's going to be the next president. Well, it's not too late to election day for any candidate, and a lot can happen. This is Ukraine; anything can happen, and especially in politics. So that's number one. Number two, though, yeah, a big move from the president would be welcome. I know, for example, some of Zelensky's teams talked about maybe doing a tax amnesty. I remember former President Kuchma did a tax amnesty back in, I think it was around 2000, 2001, and that brought back a lot of money that had been stolen, essentially, for lack of a better way to put it. And it would have gone to Cyprus, to the Netherlands, offshore zones, and it came back in the country. And the attitude was, look, we're not asking questions about how you got it. Just bring it back in, pay a small tax, like 5% tax, something like that. Pay some money in the state budget, and the economy will be better off. The money will be back in the country. It won't be in an offshore zone. So there seems to be some discussion of that, particularly within the Zelensky team. As for the president, of course he could do that at any time. He is the sitting president at this point. So my sense of it is, it's not so much about the economics that people want to see from the president. It's more about fighting corruption. I think that's the biggest concern with the president, and that's where his bold move would probably need to take place. Only one Ukrainian president has ever won re-election. That's Kuchma against the communists in 1999, and even that election was, relatively close in the early days. That bodes poorly for the president. On the other hand, it's very important to keep in mind that the first round was a freebie. You get to vote, say, screw the system, pox on the Timoshenko house, a pox on the Poroshenko house, a pox on everybody in power. When it comes right down to it, though, expect the second round to be closer. There's never been a blowout in Ukrainian elections, with the exception of 1991 and Kravchuk in Chernobyl, but that was because of the mechanics of the Soviet system. But in this case, remember that even a two-term felon, Viktor Yanukovych, got 44% of the vote in 2004 in the Orange Revolution, the third tour. I mean, this was the height of the Orange Revolution, and a two-time felon got 44%. So my prediction is that the runoff will be closer than people expect. Ukraine's a difficult country to get reelected in if you're a president. So far, Kuchma is the only guy who holds that distinction. And it wasn't particularly easy. He used a lot of the administrative levers that he had at his disposal. Those levers are not available anymore to a Ukrainian president, and for the better, because they were a little bit heavy-handed. But it'll be an interesting runoff, and we're going to be watching it closely. What was interesting, if you look at the overseas votes, of course there are only like 56,000 of them, but the overseas votes were actually heavily for Poroshenko. He finished first with the overseas votes. In country, obviously, Zelensky did well. So, Poroshenko won quite decisively among, Ukrainians outside the country. But even in the Orange Revolution, that was only 100,000 votes, which is like 0.03% of the votes in Ukraine. That's nothing. That won't be enough to sway things. I think in general, the elephant in the room is Kolomoisky. I mean, that's the thing. Is Zelensky going to be independent when he's elected? Is he going to listen to his Western advisors, Ivaris and Daniluk, or is he going to be just a marionette of Kolomoisky? If he's independent, that's a good thing for business. If he's a Kolomoisky clown, then that's going to have a chilling effect on investment super fast. The cabinet of ministers doesn't change. It'll change only after the parliamentary elections. And there's even been some talk, some articles. Diane Francis wrote, for example, that Supreme was part of the inner circle, and then later retracted the remark. But there's been some talk that Supreme might stay anyway, just because the reform is in the first step is done, but then you got the second step next year and so forth. So it's a very complicated thing. And that would be a great sign. For example, Zelensky wins. He says, Supreme stays. That would be a huge signal to World Bank, IMF, UN, all these international organizations. I'm not saying that just because I'm a friend of hers, but that would say, we're about fixing, these certain areas of the economy. We're going to do this over here. We're going to do that over there. But we're keeping the path going on this. I think that would be a great signal to send to the international community. But we'll see what happens. Zelensky actually the reason I mentioned that, Zelensky at an American Chamber of Commerce event. Andy Hunder asked a question about healthcare and the reform, and actually Zelensky was quite positive. He basically said, "Yeah, I think the reform needs to continue," and so forth. That's, by the way, I think, right after he won the first round, there was all this call, well, we got to have a debate, Poroshenko's going to knock him out in the first round. And, I think that if I were Poroshenko, I would be terrified of a debate. I mean, think about it like this. For example, already the expectation is Poroshenko's going to do a knockout punch in the debate. He's going to beat him on points and facts, and Zelensky's going to look stupid, right? If you're a comedian who has a popular TV show, you're used to giving one-liners and jabs, and he makes people laugh for a living. All he's got to do is get one good zinger on Poroshenko, and people like that's for using an American example, that's like Lloyd Benson with Dan Quayle. You're no Jack Kennedy. So I would be terrified if I was Poroshenko of going into that debate. I would not be overconfident. Sounds good. All right. Thanks, William. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.